Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our Saturday morning Bible study. Today is February 16th, 2019. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And we're so happy you could join us this morning. Today, our moderator is Luann from New York.
Good morning. I will start by reading the quote. No doubt must intervene between the promise and event. Faith and resolve are friends to truth. Seize them. Trust the divine providence. Push upward our prayers in stone, and God will give the benediction. That's from Miscellaneous Writings by Mary Baker Eddy, page 319.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is beautiful. No doubt must intervene.
Doubt is a real bugaboo, isn't it?
This is something that I was experiencing at the time when I chose this for a Bible study. I didn't really know why, but a lot of things were going on in my life at the time, and it became really clear once I started writing the questions for this Bible study that this was about God's providence.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I gave my testimony on Wednesday about all of the situations that were going on, and I had completely left God out of the picture and was just striving. Once practitioner pointed me to pray, and then all of this stuff just started coming to me, and I just kept hearing the word providence.
I think sometimes if something in the past didn't come out the way we wanted, and we keep looking at that to doubt God now, it really shuts off all the things that worked out. I mean, at least the way the positive things, the good things that have happened, and that continuing doubt from something, it's not good. A recent lesson said that confidence has its reward. It kind of rang a bell there for me again.
Thank you.
And what should we have confidence in?
In the power, the omnipotence of God, God's allness, His love.
Yeah, and we should have confidence in our spiritual sense. Because when doubt creeps in, that's the human mind that is trying to persuade you other than what your spiritual sense is telling you. It should be a red flag, shouldn't it? That something's trying to creep in to keep you from what God has for you. When you feel doubt or confusion, that's the time to say, wait, something's trying to sneak in here. That's the time to get to your books, close the door, and refresh, refill your consciousness with good.
On the way over here today, I was talking to Gary about that a very important lesson I learned here through all of this, the law case and everything, was that we can be so tempted to listen to these negative, doubtful suggestions. And it can come through people, as it did in the story today with David. I mean, he did not get any support from his brothers or Saul or anybody else. Did they tell you, puny kid, what do you think? What are you thinking? That's like, thanks a lot. He was so single-minded And this is why in the Bible, in the Sermon on the Mount, keep your eyes single. Because if you don't, you get into all this fear and confusion, and it takes you out, it takes you away. One of the main reasons that I'm here today is because of that. Because Mrs. Evans taught us when all these doubts or fears or other people coming and telling me or us, the church, whatever, oh, we're wrong, what are we doing, we're just a little church, you'll be happier outside the church, it's too much work. Believe me, those thoughts were great temptations. But anytime I indulged in them, I was confused, I was unhappy, I felt tormented. And so that, more than anything else, was a signal that I was going off the path. So I did, as Gary was saying, I would go in my room, I would shut the door, I would get out, especially Precepts, Footsteps, those books that explain Mrs. Eddy, explain what she did, explain the opposition to what she did, until I got my singleness of eye, my focus, my thought. I shut out everything else. And it was a great benefit, because now when those thoughts come, and they come in many ways, they don't come so much in that way anymore, although they could, but they don't. But maybe, you're not feeling well, or you're this, or you're tired, or you want to give up, all kinds of things. You get that singleness of thought, and you just shut them out absolutely immediately. You do not indulge in them, because you see where it goes. It goes to confusion, doubt, negativity, and that is not a good state to be. So keep on the path, whatever it takes, and keep that singleness of mind. I read in it was Spurgeon who says, and this goes to what Florence was saying, we write our benefits in dust and our injuries in marble. We inscribe our afflictions upon brass, while the records of deliverance of God are written in water. That's just what she was saying. Why don't you remember all the bad junk? Keep going over it. And keep going over it, and keep going over it, and then wonder why you're so doubtful and negative. And yet, all the good things that God has done every single day, you just take it for granted. Usually you don't even thank Him for it. Again, this leads to confusion, doubt, because it's disobedience. You're disobeying the Father. So singleness of mind. Don't allow those doubtful thoughts come in, whether they come as your own thought or a beloved family member or whoever it is.
And that's why we are so grateful for the carpenters for writing Footsteps and Precepts, because they show exactly how the devil tried to creep in to Mrs. Eddy's household, tried to creep into the work that God had sent her to do, and how she handled it. It is invaluably instructive for anyone who is serious about practicing Christian Science.
And when you are, the lessons they teach come alive. And these are the books, some of the books that were banned by Boston. Invaluable books. Anyone else?
Yeah, actually, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the Philistines, because it kind of fits into just what you were talking about, because to me they really symbolize the human mind and how it tries to take you out. But before I share some of the stuff I found, I wondered if Tom wanted to speak to the Philistines or anything before I went on.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Nice.
I did a little more history, a review about who these Philistines were again. And, of course, they were constantly attacking and invading the Israelites, and it actually even put them into some degrading servitude. They played quite a role, actually, and I had forgotten that they were involved with Samson. Samson, he was in their temple destroying their god. Dagon, I think is his name. I'm not sure I pronounced that right, but it was Baal type of worship. That's what they were. And then, of course, Samuel and Saul. In fact, Saul was killed by the Philistines in the end. Of course, David. And they were considered kind of warmongers. And these cities that they governed, Gath being one of them, the kings had a Hebrew name, Saran, that also meant tyrant, which I thought went right into our discussions of liberty and the importance of it. And one of the things that the Philistines managed to do was to make it so that the Israelites could not take care of their own weapons, and that the only blacksmiths were the Philistines. And the purpose in the Bible, it says in the Bible, lest the Hebrews make swords and spears. And I thought that was very interesting, that the Philistines managed to control and make it so that the Israelites were at their mercy. So it's something that, we have to constantly watch. And that's even like with, you just mentioned, the banning of the books. Those are the weapons that they would try to control. And then it does go on to say, I don't know, also one of the other stories that was brought to mind, the time that the Philistines took the Ark of the Covenant and then they put it next to their God, and then both mornings they came back, their God had crumbled, and so I think they gave the Ark back. I'm not quite sure how that went. Exactly, but they were very clear that it was there was a power there, and that was, of course, the Ten Commandments that was in there. And then they were known for their consumption of alcoholic beverages, and uncircumcised also meant those who had no relationship with God, which I thought was very, very important, profound. And I think I covered them all, but I did want to end with the beautiful quote that we hear often at this church that Samuel gave when in his battle with the Philistines. Quote, "Thus far the Lord has helped us," end quote.
Yes. Thank you. That's wonderful. And you see, the tactics of error of mortal mind have not changed. They still are doing exactly the same thing. Exactly. Taking your weapons away, taunting you, and whether it's in your thinking or in your home or in our nation or in our world, these are the same tactics. And if we're asleep to them, they would try to work. But you think it was for 40 days these Philistines stood there and just taunted. And haven't you ever felt at the other end of that where something is just telling you all kinds of awful things and you're just a stupid idiot and it's just over and over and over. And everyone was terrified, except for one. So we've jumped now from our quote into the meat of the story. Luann, I don't know whether you want to redirect this.
Thank you, Linda, for putting all that in there. Our topic today is heart. From 1 Samuel.
I'm sorry. Could I just please say something on that?
Sure.
What it just struck me is that that's how motives and acts that Jesus and Mary Baker Eddy spoke on are so important, because one would think taunting wouldn't be such a huge weapon, but that continuous grinding for 40 days, I mean, the Philistines knew that they were grinding down the Israelites, by simply doing it, and that's why people use propaganda and taunting and things like that as a weapon.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge in politics, isn't it? You get the human mind taunts and taunts, and it has no good ideas of its own. It just taunts.
It's the weapon of the devil to first demoralize, and then it can come in and conquer.
At least it will try.
These are wonderful ways of how animal magnetism works. And Linda, I'd like you to put wherever you found that, if you can put it on our forum or somewhere, or send it as an article to Jeremy, because that was very helpful. It is a description of the human mind and how it works.
I'm always grateful to know that these things happened before to other people. Other people have had to deal with this stuff. So when it comes to me, it's like, okay, I'm not the first. People left record how to deal with it. Okay, thank you.
Not so special, huh?
Yeah, because it'll come and you'll think, you're the only one sometimes. Or what, everybody else is doing so well. Yeah, ha, ha, ha.
That's why our testimonies are so important. It shows people what they've gone through. Excuse me. And if they came through it, you can.
That's right. That's why we give them encouragement to others. Never to brag on ourselves and how great we are, but it's encouragement to help our brother.
And show how great God is.
How great God is.
Those are requirements. Feed my sheep. Yes.
Yeah.
And to repeat a good testimony is good because you don't know who's listening each time. You don't say, oh, well, I've said this before. But bring it out again. If the person that needs it would be listening.
Right. God inspires. Yes.
Yeah, we're always getting new people.
Mm-hmm. We are.
Plus, it's good to hear it again anyway.
It is. It's good. It is. It's recounting your blessings. And as we've spoken about, there's always a new way to say it or some different lesson you learned. It doesn't have to be a total repeat of what you said the last time. And there should be ever new things to be grateful for as well.
Okay, Luann. See if you can sneak something in here.
Okay, how about the first question? How did David view the problem of Goliath? I went around and around at what word to put in there, but basically, problem.
It was a problem.
It was.
I think he looked at it as the lion and the bear, and this was just a little bit scarier picture than either one of those, and he'd already conquered the lion and the bear, and so this was just the same thing, and God would take care of it.
I think David saw the problem was the Israelites' perception of it. He was wondering why they were so worried about it. Just run up to him and chuck a stone at him.
I know Mrs. Eddy says, meet every adversary as a defeated enemy or something like that. He saw a defeated enemy before he even got started. I think that's pretty much confirmed by the language he used to speak with them. There's quite a bit here that he said, but he basically said, the power of God, you'll be defeated, even before he was standing there right before him.
He knew that.
Go ahead.
He knew that the battle is the Lord's, and it wasn't him, little David, fighting this huge Goliath, who was around 10 or 11 feet high at least, and enamored with all that huge metal and everything. I think the armor weighed like 125 pounds, and I mean, it was just quite a picture. But it wasn't David, one human going against another bigger human, but it was God in the situation, controlling everything.
Thank you.
David saw the problem as an offense to God,
Yes.
not as a problem for Israel,
Yes.
but as an attack on God.
And that is a major difference between the lion and the bear. This was an offense to God. He defied the armies of the living God. And that is what gave him. That's how he could rise to this occasion. It wasn't just like all his other battles. I mean, the lion and the bear, that was training for him, and it took courage and all of that, but they were not defying the living God. They were just hungry for the sheep. This was something more, but that was like a red flag in front of his face. That he was not going to allow, and something rose up in him. And that's when this power comes over us, when it's that sort of a battle. Because what does Mrs. Eddy say about taking offense?
Don't take offense unless it's against God.
Yes. Who can offend a whole-souled woman? And never take an offense unless the offense be to God. And this was blatantly an offense to God. So it was God, and he saw it so clearly, defeating these little gods, despite the fact of his size and everything. They were the twerps, not him. And it's interesting to me, too, because how else could he have defeated that big Goliath covered with armor, except with a little stone and a sling? How could he? I mean, he couldn't jump on top of him. He couldn't beat him up. He couldn't even, take a sword. Nothing.
I mean, the guy's armor weighed more than David did.
Yeah. So it was all God-inspired, and as we talked about on the Bible study on shepherd, these shepherd boys learned how to use these slings. Like, my gosh, they were quite adept at it, and their rods. So he was very adept at this, and he could aim it and hit it right on the mark. And he had practiced and practiced and practiced in all those years when he was a shepherd boy. So it's very important, I think, to understand, and this was something that I read in Spurgeon as well, but David prepared for this battle by cultivating his relationship with God. That's how he prepared all those years as a shepherd boy. And Spurgeon brings out in life, what we need to do is be ready. God prepares us, and if we're listening to him through the years, I mean, again, well, you've heard Jeremy's story many times. He had no idea why he was learning what he was learning, right?
I never did. People always are like, "That's not even your job. What are you doing?"
Yeah, it was just something he felt impelled and interested to do. And then God matched him up with our church. And I know the people here, I mean, Carol worked for years under Mrs. Evans, learning how to edit articles. And I'm talking about years and weeks and days and nights, right? Yes. So when it became her turn, it's like so natural for her. And the rest of us, I used to wonder, what the heck am I doing here? And yet it was preparing me for something. And I didn't know what. I had no idea. And yet But when you're ready for that, God puts it all together, and you find this divine destiny, and actually all along you were living that divine destiny. And this is more important than you seeking it out, or you deciding this, or this is what you want to do with your life, and then being very frustrated because you didn't get that job you thought you were supposed to get. Develop your relationship with God. First seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And it's never too late, and it's also never too early.
And don't ever doubt. Don't ever be discouraged, because that's the devil's tool.
If God has given you something you're extremely interested in, then go with it. Work on it. Even if you have some other job during the day, at night you develop these other talents, and eventually you'll find out why.
No doubt must intervene between the promise and event.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. That is right.
And you see people doing it. I mean, I thought throughout the years, I wondered, people seem so motivated doing things. Sometimes I wondered why. And sometimes they had peculiar interests, in my opinion. But eventually, there was a reason for it, and God brought it all together. Let God work in you. But yes, see this question. How did he view the problem? He saw it as an offense to God, and that put it in its place. In a place that it could be easily defeated. Go ahead.
I'm so grateful for what Linda shared about the Philistines taking away the weapons, because every one that David used had a spiritual import. So when the physical weapons were taken away that everybody used as a standard for warfare, they had to develop their spiritual weapons to combat that. And, for example, him testing the armor and then not using Saul's armor was covered in that beautiful Bible study on Ephesians, with putting on the armor of God on every part of your body, and then like using the smooth stones or the 5 spiritual senses, opposing one of 5 material senses, because Goliath had 4 brothers, so that was 5 total giants.
He had just what he needed. And yes, it was very much the best weapon, probably the only weapon he could have used. And then, what did he do after he chucked the stone at Goliath, as Jeremy said?
Can you take his weapons and kill them?
He used Goliath's sword to cut his head off.
Thank you. Then he ran to make sure the job was finished, because he could have easily just stunned him. And he took the sword of Goliath, the era destroying itself, you see, and he made sure the job was thoroughly done. And there was, in the parlor of Mrs. Eddy's home, a statue of, you know what?
Was it David with his cutting the head off, or having cut it off?
Yeah, I believe like his...
Yeah, that lifted up, right?
Lifted up, either that or his foot was on it or something, but it was that image.
Yeah, I think it was his foot on it. You're right.
Foot on it. I don't know what happened to that statue. Years ago, I did see it in Chestnut Hill, but I don't know where it is now. Anyway, the point being, I mean, that's not the most beautiful statue to have in your living room, but it's telling a very important lesson for us all to take to heart. The utter destruction of the error, whatever it calls itself,
which should be present in every home.
Yes.
Good reminder to see that statue every day.
Every day. That's
David's
right.
foot on Goliath.
Be sure to finish the job.
But you see, because David saw that this was an offense to God, he knew that there was something that needed to be done. If this wasn't an offense to God, David wouldn't have bothered. God would not have sent him. But it was. And that is why David went and volunteered, because God was directing him. So when God directs you, you can have all the confidence in the world to know that God will provide whatever you need to finish the job that he's sending you to do. And if something was not an offense to God, if you don't feel sent by God, then don't waste your time. Don't be personally offended by something that is not an offense to God.
Yeah, because if you're just humanly offended by things, then you get in these terrible battles. The battle with the beast. You're a beast and the other person's a beast. It's just arguing.
And you're rolling around in the mud with the beast.
Yeah. But when the offense is to God, you rise up and take care of it swiftly, which he did. He didn't hesitate. He ran toward Goliath. He offered his services. And even when he was told by his brothers and also by Saul, pretty much, well, you're crazy to do this. What did he say?
God would take care of them.
Yes. You want to read it first? Do you have it? First from his brother. Well, one major thing, he didn't get into a lengthy argument with either one of them. Go ahead.
And David said, "What have I now done? Is there not a cause?"
Is this to his brother?
Yeah, this is to his brother. So he obviously saw the offense against God, the higher cause. And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him after the former manner, which when the words were heard, which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent before him.
And then what did he say to Saul?
And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with the Philistine."
And somewhere he said, and as I did the bear and the lion, I will do to this.
The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine.
So all of these things were quite remarkable. It shows he was in the right mind because he knew how to turn these arguments around. And it was because he was so well grounded in God. He didn't get upset by it. He didn't say, "Oh my gosh, you're right. I'm just a kid. What am I thinking? Oh goodness, I'm out of here now." He could have done that, but
the brothers said to him, "Hey, you abandoned all those sheep and you came out here just to watch the battle, right?" And that's when he turned around and said, "Is there not a cause?"
Yes. So he fortified himself with the cause that they were defying God. He remembered past battles. Now, the thing about Saul, who would have been the obvious person to have taken on Goliath? If not David.
Well, Saul.
Saul, he was the king, and he was afraid. And then he offered some enticement, but anyway, he was afraid. So he could talk the talk. He knew to say, "Well, the Lord will be with you," but he didn't think the Lord was going to be with him.
Maybe he was being honest, though.
Yeah.
He hasn't been walking with God. He can't say that.
He could not. He very happily passed the buck.
And the irony was that Saul was specifically chosen king because he was the mightiest warrior.
That is irony, isn't it?
To shed some light on Saul's mindset, when David was successful, Saul then hated him.
Yes.
The envy and jealousy thing got a grab of him. He hated David.
And also this oldest brother, there was probably a lot of jealousy too, because David had been chosen, right? And he wasn't. So he put his little brother down. So did Saul. But I guess my point is that David was ready and was not intimidated
by the human mind.
He was not. No. And are you? Are you easily thrown off when someone tells you shouldn't do something, or why? Who are you to do it? Does that just throw you in down the chute, or can you stand? And can you answer it well? You see, he answered it well, and he didn't get mad or angry, or he didn't get his feelings hurt. Oh no, you think that of me? Oh my gosh, I'm your brother. I mean, all kinds of emotions can come over, but he was so tuned in to his father, he could not be thrown off from the path. So the question is, are you?
This goes back in the discussion just a little bit, but here's a line that I learned at Plainfield, page 266 of Science and Health. Mrs. Eddy writes, "The sort of science with which truth decapitates error."
Thank you. Very good. Anyone else on any of this?
I kind of picture David running up to Goliath with all that armor and stuff, and him saying, "You got nothing." That's the way to defeat error. You got nothing.
Yeah.
And he ran up to him.
He ran up to him. Yep. He was not. Remember that. Do you run to meet the error that confronts you, or do you cringe and wait for a better day that does not come? Because in your head, the error builds up, the Goliaths. What Goliaths are you having to meet? And they come in many forms. Disease, relationship problems, all kinds of things they come. And so do you just put it off for another day? Or are you quick? Procrastination is not a good thing. And it's in our lesson this week. Diligence, promptness, perseverance. You have to have that. You have to have that discipline. Don't put off for tomorrow what you can do today. Run to meet the error. Kill it while it's a little suggestion. Don't wait till it's haunted you for 40 days and 40 nights and you're
mesmerized by it.
Yeah, you're
you in the corner.
Right.
Well, I mean, David had a lot of things to deal with. He had the obvious dealing of Goliath that appeared so huge and monstrous. But he had to deal with the fact that his own family, his own country was mesmerized by this whole thing. So we don't have that problem today in this country, do we? With people being mesmerized?
Oh, well.
No.
Everyone's wide awake. I'm being facetious here.
When you're when you're on a mission to do what God says is right to do, you're going to have to deal with the mesmerism of those around you who are mesmerized. The human mind is a state of
negativity and fear and confusion, all those things.
Self-deceit, right?
And in a position to oppose the cause.
Yeah, and be on the wrong side of the solution and try to get you to stop what you know to be true. And that's why this singleness of purpose is so important. And that's why you cut it off immediately. You don't listen to it, or you will become mesmerized and you'll become part of the problem. And it will happen very fast. That's why honestly, with the organization, the way it is, being so toxic, you don't fool around with it. I got where to read anything that was put out by the organization used to literally make me ill. You can't fool with it, even though it might appear very nice. I mean, in that case, it appears nice. In the case of Goliath, it was very blatant. But now, as we are watch on Thursday, things are becoming more and more blatant. The era is just, it can't hide itself anymore. It's just like the dragon that the Bible Studies Mike moderated, just showing itself in all its ugliness. So we don't be dismayed by it. Good thing it's coming out. 2/3 destroyed. Final third will destroy itself.
So that is exactly how we ended up at Plainfield. I left the Boston Church and for a lot of good reasons, and but I occasionally read Science and Health, and I enjoyed reading. In my building where I live, there was this really, really nice lady who went to the local CS church. I mean, we get along really well. She's really, really nice. And so she wanted me to come to her branch church and would drop off literature regularly, and I'd take a look at it. And I actually felt nauseous when I started reading it.
Good sign.
Yeah, it is.
But I hadn't been feeling that way when I read Science and Health, So I usually threw out the journals. Sent those sometime after she gave them to me, but I didn't have the heart to tell her not to stop giving them to me, She's such a sweet person. But, I mean, so if it weren't for that, I probably never would have ended up at Plainfield. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Well, we've all had similar experiences, I think, right?
Yeah, the nauseous feeling is a good thing. I know before I came here, I would look into a lot of different things, Buddhism or whatever, and I would always get to this point where I would get that nauseous feeling. So when I came here, I just thought, well, I actually sort of figured it would come eventually. I'm glad it has not.
You're still waiting for it.
Well, I did with everything else, so. But thankfully, it has not come. So very grateful for that.
But Thomas is doing the right thing, because by taking that literature and recycling it or getting rid of it, then nobody else is going to get poisoned by it.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. And, it's true of the Peel books, too. It's poison. Gary wrote a letter to Longyear asking them what's the matter with them that they're selling it. So it doesn't please us to have to say these things, but who is telling of the foe and ambush? And years ago, I probably wouldn't have said it, would have thought it was okay, but things have gotten progressively worse, the error. And really, to fool around with it. I mean, if you can tolerate it, if it's working for you, do whatever works for you is fine. I would never tell anyone what to do. But
well, Mrs. Eddy made it very clear with Gesterfeld in her time period, who could speak the language very clearly and sound just like science, that it was what was behind it that was causing the problem, the thought behind it. And that's what made it so tricky.
Absolutely. So tricky.
And that's actually in the church manual. There's a bylaw that you have to take into consideration the thought of the person writing whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I had tried several different churches in Washington, several different Christian Science churches, and a number of different practitioners. And I was just desperate. And then I just landed at Plainsfield, and everything was okay.
Well, thank God. And I mean, you have to be ready for this place like anything else. You have to be ready, and I guess either you really get it and say, wow, this is it, or you don't. And if you don't, it's fine, whatever. But
Do what you got to do.
yeah, and learn what you have to learn.
So, Luann.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom, for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're on question number 2, and we touched on it a little bit. Why didn't David take Saul's armor into battle against Goliath?
Can I read that first?
Okay. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put his helmet on his brass on his head. And also he armed him with his coat of mail. David girded his sword upon his armor. He essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him.
There we go.
Can't fight error on error's terms.
And then Psalm 44, 5 to 7. Anyone want to read that?
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Through thee will we push down our enemies. Through thy name will we tread them under that rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, shall my sword save me. Thou hast saved us from our enemies, and hast put them to shame that hated us.
Thank you. There it is, plain as can be. And who wrote that psalm?
David.
David.
David. Because he knew.
There's also a passage in 2 Corinthians 10, 4 and 5. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to pull down to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ.
Thank you.
Saul was seeing his armor as from a human standpoint, going into battle with these physical things that were stronger than Goliath. But Goliath represents the paganism and the enemy. So David's telling them that we can't go into battle with our human sense, that it's go into it with our spiritual sense. Warfare is not carnal. You have to look at the whole situation from just like you have to look at this whole situation from a spiritual point of view. This is enmity against God, and these material things are not going to cut it in battle.
Thank you very much.
Well, and God had prepared him in different ways. He hadn't proved himself in battle with all of his armor and sword and stuff. It wasn't him. Which is why you can't go around spouting something that you haven't proved for yourself. You can't try something that somebody else has proved for themselves, but you haven't proved for yourself.
Thank you. That's so important. then you have the authority to cast down any error. This isn't about just listening to what others are saying or doing. This is about you doing it. And it was interesting. Go ahead.
I love this passage. There's a lot of lessons we've been learning at the church that touch on this. If you remember the lesson on Gideon, where he had, 30,000 men, and God said, I don't want to have 30,000 men because I don't want you guys thinking that you won the battle because you had 30,000 men. So he called out, all but 300, so that after the battle was won, they would know that it was God. And I think it's that whole idea that God is sort of radically stripping away anything we depend on other than Him. And just like in Saul's mind, girding David with his armor and a sword was, sort of the logical human thing to do. But of course, God had a much better, bigger agenda, which is, this battle is God's, and He's going to win it the way He sees fit, and we're all going to bow down and worship Him when the battle's over, because it's so clearly the shepherd boy can level this massive giant with a stone. Something's going on here that doesn't fit the way we normally live. I love this, and Gideon, and there's all these other passages in the scriptures that are telling us that the perspective, God is trying to get us to have His perspective on these things and not to be mesmerized by the perspective of the world. Anyway, I just love this passage.
Yes, thank you so much. It's true, because you think one little shepherd boy defeated the Goliath and the whole Philistine army. So that's why, we never have to be impressed by numbers.
This little church doing all it's done.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I think numbers or what kind of disease or whatever, because when it seems so tall, is it bigger than God? Not. So.
Not.
Never. No.
Not quantity, it's quality.
Yep, and that's why we've talked about the remnant too. And you see in that story of Gideon, all the ones that were afraid, the ones that weren't alert, those were the ones that were
called out.
Called out, yep. To just a small band who could do the work. A small band can be very efficient than some great big, huge, unwieldy thing.
They would have been in the way anyway.
They would have.
Exactly. Well, and there's a saying, isn't there? One with God is a majority. And isn't that what that means? It only takes one obedient to God to defeat any error.
Spurgeon says, vain is it for the church even to think that she will win the victory by wealth or by rank or by civil authority. No government will assist her. To the power of God alone she must look. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Happy will it be for the church when she learns that lesson. And that is, one of the things that we really work hard at, keep this church through demonstration, through turning to God for all its answers, for everything. If we do that, we're okay. If we turn to our own ways and means, we're sunk. We'll just become another human organization.
Like the human organization in Boston. Or in Rome, or, whatever.
Matthew Henry mentioned the whole armor of God. I think that was the Ephesians that Mike was talking about also.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, David knew what his armor was. He knew that his armor was his relationship to God, his unswerving obedience to God. It had saved him many, many times. When being shepherding the sheep. And he had no doubt. He had proved it to himself. Well, that's why when this Goliath showed up, he couldn't understand why everybody was so afraid. So it's good to look. Are there any Goliaths in my life?
Yeah, because this is the antidote to whatever Goliath you're confronted with.
Well, and if there is, well, I have omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, omniaction on my side. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Bicknell Young said, if you think you have a lot to meet, think of what you have to meet it with.
that's why I think that article, Taking the Side of Spirit, I think it's just marvelous.
Yeah.
It's on the carousel.
Thank you.
Oh, and that's a good segue into the next question, isn't it?
Yes. Go on to the next.
Okay. Question number 3. What does divine providence mean?
Well, one definition is in traditional theism, God is the creator of heaven and earth, and all that occurs in the universe takes place under divine providence, under God's sovereign guidance and control, with wisdom and love.
To go with that, in Matthew Henry, it says it's God's intervention, just like was stated, in the universe.
Thank you, yes.
And that implies, however, that implies something, doesn't it? Doesn't that imply that sometimes he's absent? Then he comes back and intervenes? I like good old Daniel Webster myself in 1828. The care and superintendence which God exercises over his creatures.
And it's always going on.
We either recognize it and accept it, or we ignore it and look to something else to provide, or in other words, worship another God.
I looked up a few things that Mrs. Eddy says about it, and as did Luann with that beautiful quote read at the beginning from Miscellaneous Writings. These are also miscellaneous writings. This one, page 80. And this would be good for a watch, actually. Unconstitutional and unjust coercive legislation and laws infringing individual rights must be a few days and full of trouble. The Vox Populi, through the providence of God, promotes and impels all true reform, and at the best time will redress wrongs and rectify injustice. Tyranny can thrive but feebly under our government. God reigns and will turn and overturn until right is found supreme.
Amen.
Now, and one thing, and I've heard about this, the only way I heard about it was through Judy, that in New Jersey there's going to be legislation that's going to
religious vaccination.
Yeah.
And the exemption.
And the exemption.
Yeah, it's going to make it much, much more difficult to get a religious exemption from required vaccination for your children.
It's always something we could do. We had a form, and
it's no longer just filling out a form. You got to write a thesis on what the tenets of your religion are and why vaccination would be contrary to those tenets. You got to get it approved by the Commissioner of Health. The Commissioner of Health has the right to overturn it and reject it.
And what this is going for is that pretty soon everyone's going to be required to be vaccinated, not just children. So it's the little here, little there, little here, little there. Now, I heard nothing about this. Judy had to tell me. She lives in Maine. And then finding it wasn't easy. I asked my son, who's somewhat active in New Jersey politics. He never heard about it. It's coming up for a vote. But this is how things happen, and this is how things change. And this is why this statement I just read on 80 of miscellaneous writings is so important. And this is the divine intervention that we must know is going on. And then this one on page 163, speaking of Christ Jesus, his words were articulated in the language of a declining race and committed to the providence of God. In no one thing seemed he less human and more divine than in his unfaltering faith in the immortality of truth. Referring to this, he said, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away." And they have not. They still live and are the basis of divine liberty, the medium of mind, the hope of the race. So, this is what divine intervention did. This is what it can do for our church to keep it prospering and growing and continuing. That would be a good quote. Our next liberator will be on liberty. And then, page 312, and this is the Honorable Charles Carroll Bonney, President of the World Congress Auxiliary. In his remarks before that body said, "No more striking manifestation of the interposition of divine providence in human affairs has come in recent years than that shown in the raising up of the body of people known as Christian Scientists, who are called to declare the real harmony between religion and science and to restore the waning faith of many in the verities of the sacred scriptures." How true. And, we had a few letters, one again from our dear friend Napoleon, who said, you don't have to read it.
Oh, he basically just said that he was so grateful to be doing this translation work, and he's freed up all of his time to work on this because he's been getting so much out of it for his own, the strengthening of his own faith, and he just thinks it's wonderful what this church offers.
And that is thrilling. And his reaching out to us was divine providence. We lost the deal, his translating, and he, according to Joseph, he is fine. But then this church reached out and found us, divine providence.
Both sides of it too. Him reaching out and us taking a cold call, which usually doesn't work. So the fact that we listened was really wonderful.
Yes, and you see, he's getting from it what he should, and he will share it with others. I'm sure it's uplifting thought. And Benjamin had the thought to send him a Science and Health, which we did, which was, again, inspired. And then we also heard from, I don't know if all of you remember, someone who wrote to us about Einstein. He investigated Einstein and what Einstein said about Christian Science, and it was in a sort of an obscure book, and he sent it to us, and he expressed gratitude for our church. Well, he wrote us again, and these I'll probably be reading on Wednesday, parts of it anyway. He expressed great gratitude for our website, especially some of the audio, the YouTube. And he obviously, in reading about it, and he has quite a scientific background, he said he did write for the journals and things, so he is a Christian Scientist of sorts, but he sees the value of our church, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Again, though, divine providence, finding people, having people find us, all working together. And we just have to be ready. Remember that. We are ready. We're ready for them. Our website is ready. Jeremy works day and night to keep it ready. And so when it comes, and it is coming, we're here. We're ready for it. And it's all God's doing, not our own. Divine providence.
Another thing from Webster's 1828 that he writes is, it's the foresight accompanied with the procurement of what is necessary for future use and with suitable preparation. I like that.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. Yes. And that was so inspired. Luann, she was so inspired by those words, divine providence, to tie it all up, because it really all goes. The last question is, how did it relate to David and Goliath? So, which we've talked about.
I wanted to read one more quote from Mrs. Eddy out of Science and Health, page 424, which kind of goes along with this whole thing of what David saw and what Saul saw. Accidents are unknown to God or immortal mind, and we must leave the mortal basis of belief and unite with the one mind in order to change the notion of chance to the proper sense of God's unerring direction and thus bring out harmony. Under divine providence, there can be no accidents, since there is no room for imperfection in perfection.
That is beautiful, perfect. Excellent. I just gave that out yesterday. That was perfect. Thank you. Yes. And that is something we've talked about. And Mrs. Eddy in Watch's Person Arguments, she said, daily we have to know that there are no accidents in divine mind. We have to know about no dimming eyesight. There's certain things we are to handle every day. And if she tells us to, we should.
Because it's divine providence that she's telling us to.
It is. Yes, it is. Thank you, Luann.
Well, that's a
fitting ending.
Fitting ending. Thank you, Luann.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.